They put her on weather duty 7 minutes later. She faced a dark drone army alone at midnight. The wind howled outside the station as Delilah nervously checked her instruments. Storms were brewing on the radar, twisting and churning like angry spirits. The lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. It wasn't just the weather that felt off. An unsettling buzz filled the air, making the hairs on her arms stand up. What was happening out there? Just as the clock struck midnight, the strangest thing occurred. A swarm of black drones appeared on the horizon, moving as one, gliding silently through the night sky. They gleamed under the moonlight, a mechanical army that filled Delilah with a visceral dread. Her stomach churned. Who were they? What did they want? She fumbled with her radio, voice trembling. This is Delilah at the weather station. I see something, it's flying right toward me. But the radio hissed back in silence. And then it crackled to life, an ominous whisper sending chills down her spine. You should not be outside, you are not safe. A knot formed in her throat. She looked out the window, eyes wide. The drones hovered ominously, their red lights blinking systematically like a countdown to doom. Delilah's heart raced, each thump echoing in her ears. Her breath quickened. These weren't ordinary storm drones, there was something menacing about them. She felt trapped, isolated, staring into the dark void beyond her station, where the unknown lay waiting. She could feel the shadows creeping in, wrapping around her. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. A deep breath. She had to act. Delilah grabbed her jacket, panic igniting in her chest. The emergency sirens wailed in the distance, a haunting symphony of urgency. Just then, a blinding flash lit up the night, illuminating the swarm as they darted down, swirling around her like a vicious storm of metal. The sound of whirring blades ramped up, drowning out her thoughts, and just like that, the room froze in pitch blackness. The only thing that remained was the overwhelming sound of silence before the thunderous chaos exploded around her. Was this the end? Was there anyone left to save her? Or would she face the dark drone army alone? The room pulsated with the threat of the unknown as the darkness enveloped Delilah. Each second dragged, weighted by the oppressive silence that followed the whir of the drones. She raised her hands instinctively, shielding her face from what felt like an oncoming storm. But there were no raindrops, only the metallic taste of terror filled her mouth. Suddenly, a blinding beam sliced through the twilight, seizing her attention. She squinted against the brightness, spotting several drones swooping low, their lights casting a hellish glow on the crumbling walls of the weather station. Her heart thundered like a runaway freight train, and a primal urge to flee surged through her veins. Sprinting away from the window, she dashed toward the equipment room, hoping her radio would come to life. The air felt electric, each breath stinging her lungs. She reached the console and fumbled with the buttons, her fingers shaking uncontrollably. Hello? Is anyone out there? She begged into the static, desperation coating her voice. Silence answered her. It was as if the world outside had erased her right to exist. Then she spotted the emergency beacon. It blared with urgency, flooding the small room with crimson light. Her mind raced, the sirens had to be heard. Someone had to know something. She activated the beacon, sending bursts of light into the night sky, hoping it would reach someone. Anyone. As she ran back to the window, her breath hitched. The drones were no longer hovering. They had descended upon the ground, forming an impenetrable wall of glinting metal. Their cold, red lights pulsed like hearts, steady and unfeeling. Her courage dwindled. Alone against a network of guidance and control, she felt her spirit rattling between panic and resolution that a sudden noise shattered her trance. A loud crack followed by an explosion of glass erupted from the building's main entrance. The drones responded in perfect synchrony, speeding towards the sound with eerie precision. Delilah's heart raced as she watched them vanish into the darkness beyond her line of sight. It was just the wind, she told herself desperately, but then, she heard voices urgent, angry whispers bleeding into her consciousness like an invasion. They were masked by the roar of the storm, but distinct enough to send shivers cascading down her spine. What were they saying? The words felt sharp, thin enough to cut through her resolve. She knew she needed a plan and fast. Panic was a thief, robbing her of clarity. Where could she hide? The basement? The thought chilled her. The darkness beneath the station was thick and suffocating, a void she had always avoided. But there was no choice. If the drones were targeting her, she may as well make it hard for them. With one last, defiant look at the chaos outside, she grabbed a flashlight and fled down the creaking steps into the abyss. An icy breath slid along her neck as she entered the basement, the flashlight beam barely penetrating the thick darkness. What awaited her down here? The echoes of her footsteps grew muffled as Delilah let the door creak closed behind her. What was lurking in the shadows of the station's underbelly? And then, as if responding to her thoughts, the faint whir of drone blades filled the air. The hum of the drones grew louder, a mechanical chorus echoing around her. Panic shot through Delilah as she edged deeper into the blackened basement, her heart racing against the thick silence. She turned the flashlight on, the weak beam flickering across damp stone walls that seemed to press in on her. Shadows danced, and she felt a chill creep up her spine. She pressed her back against the cool wall, biting her lip to stifle a scream. The whispers above turned into chaotic shouts, mingled with the whir of engines. Were they here for her? Or was there someone else, someone worse? A muffled clang pierced through the noise, and she knew the drones were searching, hunting. Desperate, she scanned the room. Old crates and a rusty workbench filled the space. Were they hiding secrets? As she crept closer to the workbench, the beam of her flashlight caught something shiny. A crowbar lay there, its metal cold and inviting. She snatched it up, feeling a flicker of strength ignite within her. But just as quickly, her heart plummeted. The drones, their lights were back. She could see them looping overhead, their distinctive angular shapes slicing through the darkness. The air shifted and vibrated with the weight of their presence. They weren't just machines, they were predators. Think, Delilah. What do you do now? She whispered to herself, her voice trembling. The basement offered no refuge from the horror above, it was just a trap. She could stay hidden, but for how long? She needed a way out. Suddenly, the overhead drone lights began to flicker erratically before snapping off altogether, bathing her in ominous darkness. An unsettling quiet descended, and her breath caught in her throat. She felt the urge to bolt but reminded herself to remain steady. Fear could be a powerful motivator, but it could also be paralyzing. Then, emerging from the shadows, a figure took shape. A man, cloaked in darkness, eyes gleaming eerily in the feeble light of the flashlight. He raised a hand, signaling her to remain silent. Was he friend or foe? A knot twisted in her stomach, and she felt the crowbar trembling in her grip. Stay quiet, he mouthed, his features barely distinguishable. He had a rugged look, someone who had seen the worst. They're hunting. We need to move. Before she could respond, he turned sharply, darting towards a narrow door she hadn't noticed. With a shared understanding, they slipped through, the door creaking ominously as they entered another damp corridor. Keenly aware of the sound of shifting talons and buzzing engines outside, Delilah followed him, each step tentative, weighing the danger of exposure against the thrill of escape. The corridor spiraled like a labyrinth, dimly lit with sporadic bulbs that buzzed ominously. Who are you? She gasped, keeping her voice low as if the walls themselves could betray them. A survivor, he replied, glancing back with a grim smile. You're not alone anymore, but we need to act fast. They know we're in here. As he turned a corner, Delilah's heart sank further into fear. The basement was already feeling like a tomb, a place where secrets remained to smother hope. And yet she sensed he was right, the drones were no longer patrolling over them. They were preparing for something. With a newfound determination, she followed him deeper into the bowels of the old station. But in the back of her mind, one thought pounded relentlessly: what if this stranger was just as much of a threat? The moment they reached a metal door at the end of the hallway, he paused. "We're not safe here. I can get you out, but we have to trust each other." Her breath quickened. Did she dare? Would it lead to freedom or a greater peril? Delilah knew then, with every cell in her body alive with dread, the stakes were higher than she ever imagined. And then just beyond the door a loud metallic thud echoed through the corridor, sending a shiver down her spine. Delilah froze, her body rigid as the sound reverberated through the damp corridor. The metallic thud was followed by a series of rapid, staccato sounds that set her heart racing. The stranger glanced back at her, his eyes wide with urgency, and for a fleeting moment, she saw something in his gaze, a mix of fear and determination that mirrored her own. "They're close," he hissed, shifting his weight as if contemplating their next move. His breath was shallow, and in that dim light, he looked like a cornered animal, ready to pounce or run. What happened? What's on the other side? Delilah whispered, desperation tightening her voice. "Just keep moving. We'll figure it out when we get there." He pressed against the door, straining against whatever danger might lurk just outside. Sweat beaded on his brow. Delilah's grip on the crowbar tightened. She felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her, but there was no time to dwell. What if? No what ifs. They'll find us in a second. That was all the encouragement Delilah needed. The looming threat of the drones gripped her tighter than the darkness around them. She steeled herself and nodded, pushing her fear aside. Together, they shoved the door open with a loud creak, stepping into a hallway bathed in shadows. Cold air hit her like a slap. She squinted into the dark, straining to hear any signs of pursuit. The pounding of her heart echoed like a drum against the silence. He hurried forward, and she followed, adrenaline propelling her forward. But before long, they halted with a shared gasp. Staring down the corridor, they caught sight of a flickering light at the end, red and green against the oppressive black, like a beacon. "Is that a way out?" Delilah asked, hope festering alongside her fear. "Or it's the trap." "We'll have to risk it," he replied, urgency lacing his words as he eyed her. "Stay close." They pushed through the hallway, the silence heavy and suffocating. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shook with another thud, this one louder, closer. And then, a piercing whir rang through the air, chilling her to the bone. "Drones!" the stranger shouted, sprinting down the hallway. Delilah felt her legs move before she even processed it. Fear became her fuel. The sound of whirring engines grew louder, joining with the pounding of her heart as she sprinted. Ahead, the red and green lights grew stronger, but her thoughts spiraled, veering between desperate optimism and an overwhelming grasp of dread. Were they leading her toward salvation or doom? As they neared the light, Delilah spotted movement. Shapes danced beneath the halo of color, towering silhouettes, dark and menacing. She skidded to a halt, her breath catching as she realized the light came from a massive docking bay filled with drones, hundreds of them. "No, no, no," she whispered, almost breathlessly. "We can't go in there. Turn. We'll find another way." The stranger yanked her back as they pivoted, but it was too late. The ominous whir of engines shifted to a steady buzz, a chorus of mechanical menace that enveloped them. A group of drones powered up, their red lights glowing fiercely as they turned toward the intruders. Delilah's heart sank. They were surrounded. The stranger raised his arms, panic flaring his features. "Run!" Delilah spun and sprinted back the way they came. The drones headed their way. But her footing faltered as the world around her spiraled into chaos. The engines roared, lights flashing, and shadows chased her down the corridor. She had no idea where she was running, but one thing was clear, her time was running out. They turned another corner, the pounding echoing behind them, growing ever closer. Ahead lay another door solid and looming. Desperation surged within her as she realized this could be the one chance for escape, but just as they reached it, the door clanged shut, sealed, as if mocking their efforts. Delilah pounded on it with her fists. "Let us through." Just then, static crackled, and a voice emerged through a speaker above them, icy and calculated. "You will not escape." The stranger's face hardened. "With resolve. Get ready for anything." Delilah's breath grew shallow. They had only moments left. Would they face the swarm together, or would the darkness swallow them whole? With no way out and nowhere to hide, they prepared to face the relentless tide of machinery rushing toward them, knowing that survival often demanded the ultimate sacrifice. Would it be their last stand? This was the moment they had to fight, and it was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. She raised the crowbar, ready to confront whatever horror awaited them, as the first drones burst through the door. The door crashed open, and the chaos erupted. Drones poured through like a swarm of angry bees, whirring with menace, their red lights piercing the darkness. Delilah's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet felt glued to the floor. "Delilah! Move!" The stranger's voice cut through her paralysis, pulling her back to the present. She couldn't think. She couldn't falter. She took a deep breath and burst out of her shock, darting down the corridor, the crowbar clutched tightly in her hands. As they ran, she could hear the buzzing engines behind her growing louder, the air heavy with the rising hum of mechanized death. "This way!" The stranger shouted, veering toward a side passage, a narrow opening shrouded in darkness. Delilah followed, her pulse pounding in her ears like a war drum. They ducked into the passage just as the first drone rounded the corner, its whirring blade slicing the air. The stranger pressed against the wall, pulling Delilah down beside him. They held their breath, the darkness wrapping around them like a shroud. Static crackled again from somewhere just outside the passage. A low, robotic voice filled the air. "Locate the intruders. Engage." The metallic command sent a chill racing up Delilah's spine. They were tracking her. "They'll find us," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Not if we move," he replied, his gaze burning with resolve. "We just have to keep going." Delilah nodded, squeezing the crowbar until her knuckles turned white. She had to shake this feeling of doom weighing her down. They pushed deeper into the passage, the oppressive darkness closing in. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled into a small room, a maintenance closet littered with rusted tools and the scent of stale grease hanging in the air. The stranger quickly shoved the door shut behind them, pressing his body against it, his breath heavy. "What now?" Delilah asked, panting, casting frantic glances around the cramped space. "Catch your breath," he said, scanning the room, "then we look for a way out." He rummaged through the clutter, pulling out a worn-out toolbox. "Maybe we can use something." A sudden crash resonated from outside, sending a shockwave through the door. The drones were relentless, their buzzing intensifying as more of them converged on the closet. "Delilah," the stranger started, his voice low, "if they get in what?" Panic surged in her throat. "What do you mean?" "They'll come for us." "We can't let them," he said, determination etching deeper into his features. "We'll fight. We're not going down without a fight." She felt her heart race even faster. "But we're outnumbered." "Maybe," he admitted. "But we can't let them have us. We need to find a way to disable them. There might be something in here." Her mind flickered back to the docking bay, where the drones had been powered up. If they could generate a short circuit, there might be a chance to overwhelm them. "Do you think these tools can help?" she asked, her fingers brushing a rusty wrench. The stranger nodded, his eyes lighting up. "We can rig something. We need to act fast while we still have a moment." Just as they knelt to gather supplies, the doors shook violently, a collective drone thrumming just outside, the girls' shadows dancing along the dingy walls. Now! He shouted, adrenaline fueling their movements. They scrambled to piece together a makeshift weapon while the door buckled in protest against the onslaught. I can hear them. They're coming. Delilah breathed, fear rushing through her in cold waves. But in that moment of despair, a flicker of resilience ignited within her. This was her fight too. They couldn't afford to give in now. Together, they would confront the darkness together, or they would face their end as comrades, with tools gripped tightly, their hearts raced with the rhythm of looming dread. Would they succeed, or would they fall beneath the whirring blades of the swarm? A thought pierced through, amidst the chaos, what if they discovered something far darker lurking in the heart of the drones? As the door splintered further, Delilah's resolve hardened. There. Time was running out. What would they unleash when the drones finally broke through? Delilah gripped the rusty wrench tighter, her knuckles white against the grime. The door thudded continuously, the relentless whirring of the drones echoing like a death sentence. She could almost feel their cold, calculating eyes focused on the closet where they hid. Think. She urged herself, her mind racing as adrenaline pumped through her veins. The stranger was muttering urgent calculations under his breath, flipping a busted circuit board in his hands. Each powerful kick to the door screamed a countdown, and as the wood splintered more, a sinking dread clawed at her gut. What if they? She started, but he silenced her with a glare. No what ifs. We need a plan. His intensity was infectious, but the fear still gnawed at her. She had never faced anything like this. It felt surreal, like a waking nightmare, a far cry from the mundane chaos of her life before. A crash echoed outside the door, making them both jump. One more blow, and the door would surrender. Okay, he said, his voice steady despite the storm surrounding them. We create an EMP. It'll mess with their circuitry. If we can harness enough power from this, he waved the circuit board, we can take out the drones in one go. Delilah's heart raced. How? We don't have time to figure this out. You have to trust me. The next kick from the drones rattled the door loose. Just one more, and they'd be exposed. Grab the toolbox. He barked, and Delilah dove into the piles of rusted tools, feeling her pulse drum in her ears. She snagged pliers, a screwdriver, anything that might help. Together they worked quickly, forming a hastily constructed device from scraps, a jerry-rigged mess that might do the job if luck were on their side. The door shook again, and Delilah's hands trembled. What if it doesn't work? Then we fight, he said bluntly, meeting her gaze. There was a fierce resolve in him, shifting the panic in her chest into a flicker of hope. But I want to let them take us. Just as the door threatened to buckle, a loud crack of breaking wood echoed through the closet, and daylight spilled into the cramped space. Delilah's heart dropped, she could see the glint of steel drone bodies filling the entryway. Now! He shouted. They launched their makeshift EMP into the approaching chaos just as the first drone pushed its way through the splintered door. Sparks ignited, flaring with the brightness of a small sun. With the screeching of metal, the closest drones began to collapse in a shower of sparks, their red lights flickering violently, but it wasn't enough. More drones surged forward, the corridor filling with their relentless buzz. And those that fell were replaced by fresh bodies, undeterred and ravenous. Keep going. She screamed, the weight of dread pulling at her voice. We need to flank them. There's a maintenance exit at the end of this corridor. He shouted back, pushing her toward the widening breach. With her heart hammering against her ribcage, Delilah lunged onto the path, wielding her crowbar like a shield. The drones whirred unyieldingly, their whirling blades ready to carve them apart. They darted down the corridor as the air thickened with tension, but as they ran, a low humming sound enveloped them, a resonance that caused the hair on Delilah's arms to stand on end. It was a sound that spoke of something darker lurking just beyond the drones, a chilling presence that sent shivers scrolling down her spine. What is that? She gasped, as a shadow flickered in her peripheral vision, larger than any drone. What do you mean? He replied, eyes darting around, tension tightening the muscles in his jaw. It wasn't just drones. Something else was awakening, something they hadn't calculated. Delilah's breath hitched as she realized they were venturing deeper into a sinister trap. In a heartbeat, everything shifted. The drones clashed, swirling chaos pulsing through the corridor, and there, in the heart of it all, stood their greatest threat. A massive drone, gleaming with dark menace, loomed at the end of their escape route, its eyes shining with an unsettling intelligence. Delilah felt her breath catch in her throat, realization striking with icy clarity. They hadn't just unleashed drones, they were about to confront a new terror, one that viewed them not as intruders but prey. The darkness ahead surged with potential danger, and she understood one thing: survival would now demand more than just brute force. "Run!" she yelled, as dread curled in the pit of her stomach. But escape would come at a cost, and as they raced towards the looming figure, Delilah couldn't shake the feeling: what if the real nightmare was just beginning? Delilah's mind raced, adrenaline pumping through her veins as she tore down the corridor, heart pounding in time with her desperate feet. The massive drone loomed closer, a chilling shadow draped in malice. She could feel its gaze bearing down on her, a calculated predator, fixated on its prey. "Keep moving!" she shouted, trying to rally her wavering courage. But doubt washed over her. The EMP was a temporary fix, the real threat was still hunting them. The drone's menacing eyes glinted as they narrowed, and she realized she was running straight into its trap. "Which way?" the stranger shouted, glancing back with fear-stricken eyes. "Left!" she shouted back, instinct guiding them toward the wall lined with rusty pipes and dim yellow emergency lights. They rounded the corner, racing toward what looked like a battered service exit. The sound of metallic buzzing surged from behind, growing louder, a horror chorus heralding their imminent doom. As they dashed through the exit, Delilah slammed the door shut, holding her breath for a heartbeat. The heavy sound of the drone crashing against the doorway reverberated through her, amplifying her fear. "We need to reinforce it," Delilah exclaimed, searching the cramped space for anything useful. "Here, help me with this." The stranger grabbed a metal shelf and shoved it against the door, his strength aiding her resolve. "That won't hold them forever," she gasped, panic clawing at her throat. Just a moment he trailed off, focused on a flickering light fixture above them. "If we can get to the control panel, we can override the system. Maybe we can gain the upper hand." His optimism was contagious even under the weight of dread. "What do you need?" "Tools," he barked, urging her to keep searching. "Anything that can reroute power. Fast." Delilah grabbed a handful of wiring and tools, her hands shaking. In this flickering underbelly, she spotted a window, a small, grimy glass pane showing the night outside. It seemed so peaceful compared to the chaos swirling within. Then, just as he began wiring the tools together, she heard it. The unmistakable thud of drone bodies crashing against the door. "I can't create a diversion if they're right here," he muttered, frustration lacing his tone. "Then we fight," she snapped back, steeling herself. The sounds of whirring blades were merging into a cacophony, and fear threatened to consume her. "Not like this." "Then tell me something I can do." Delilah shot back, the heat surging in her face. The ground shook with renewed assaults against the door. Just as they finished rigging the wires together, the shelf toppled, and the door splintered. They had mere seconds before the drones poured in. "Get ready," he shouted, clutching the haphazard device like a lifeline. "On 3, we unleash this thing. 1, 2. The door burst open, a flurry of metal and beeping chaos spilling in. But just as Delilah braced for the worst, a piercing howl erupted from above the massive drone, now fully aware of them. Everything froze. Time stretched as Delilah gazed into its avaricious eyes, waiting for the slightest movement. "Now!" he yelled, and they hurled the makeshift device into the mass of drones. A brilliant flash erupted, sparks flying as drones began to malfunction and crash. But as the mechanical chaos swirled, it revealed an even darker truth. More drones filtered in from side halls, from above, from below. Delilah's heart raced. The room felt smaller, the weight of the rising threat pressing down with suffocating intensity. The massive drone roared in frustration, its sensors locking onto Delilah and the stranger. More than just a machine, it was as if it were sensing their very existence. This way. He pulled her toward the shadows at the edge of the room. Behind them, the chaos intensified, screams of metal mingling with the rising wave of desperation. As Delilah ran, tearing through the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling they were not just facing drones but something far worse, something that had been waiting in the wings, and as they slipped into the unknown, she felt an icy grasp wrap around her heart, a realization that they were not only fighting for their lives but for a truth hidden within this mechanical nightmare. What had they really unleashed? As they stumbled deeper into the darkness, the shudders of dread echoed louder than before. They were not safe yet, the nightmare was only beginning to unfurl all its terrors, and this time, the stakes would be even higher. Their footsteps echoed as they plunged deeper into what felt like an endless abyss. Delilah hardly registered the damp walls closing in around them, too preoccupied with the immediate danger lurking behind. The flickering lights cast sinister shadows that danced across the peeling paint, making each creak and groan of the building sound like a whispering doom. What now? She gasped, trying to catch her breath while masking the tremor in her voice. There should be a maintenance shaft up ahead, the stranger replied, urgency lacing his words. If we can reach that, we might find a way to get out and figure out where we are. Delilah nodded, gripping the tools tightly, their sharp edges a comforting reminder that she was still in control. She followed him through the thickening darkness as the sounds of chaos faded behind them. But a gnawing sensation clawed at her insides. They weren't alone down here. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low hum vibrated through the corridor, buzzing like a swarm of angry bees. Delilah stopped short, her body instinctively tensing as a chill shot up her spine. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, anxiety pooling in her stomach. That he nodded, eyes wide. "What is that?" Before she could answer, a blinding light swept over them, illuminating the area with an unsettling brightness. Delilah squinted, her heart racing as she turned in its direction. The beam spotlighted a massive vent above them, its metal grate nearly vibrating with energy. "Oh God, it's coming!" she cried out as a dark figure pushed through the grating, falling with an unsettling grace. That it landed silently, a drone, sleek and menacing, its sensors scanning hungrily. It didn't move closer but instead hovered, emitting a low beep, as if waiting for a command. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing her arm, pulling her in the opposite direction. They took off just as another drone broke free from the shadows behind them. They sprinted forward, adrenaline spurring them on as they rounded the corner. But the ground trembled beneath their feet, a vibrating warning of the gathering storm. Drones began to pour into the corridor like black blood seeping from a wound. Delilah felt every strand of fear tighten around her throat. The drones were everywhere, a relentless army of shadows. "The shaft!" he yelled, pointing ahead where a narrow opening beckoned. "We can hide in there." Without a second thought, they dove into the shaft, scrambling into the cramped space. The air was stale, the sound of their breaths drowning in a cacophony of beeping and mechanical whirring echoing like a grim symphony around them. "Is this a dead end?" Delilah asked, panic threading through her voice. "No, there should be a way out," he insisted, eyes scanning the darkness around them. "We just need to." A thunderous crash resounded behind them. A drone had found the shaft entrance, and the hum of its blades was a death knell in the tight space. "Go!" he urged, shoving her farther into the narrow confines. Delilah squeezed through, barely feeling the jagged metal scrape her skin. The sound of grinding gears and heavy machinery rose around her. How many were coming? Where was the exit? Abruptly, the shaft opened into a larger alcove. Gasping, they clutched each other's hands, scanning the surrounding area. Dim emergency lights flickered on and off in a haunting manner, offering only glimpses of their surroundings. That's when they saw it, a door, old and rusted, barely hanging on its hinges, yet it seemed like their only hope. "Delilah, this could be it," he urged, but before they could reach it, the floor above shook again under the weight of the drones chasing them. They could hear the beeping intensify, a dissonance of mechanical madness. Delilah's heart raced, and every instinct screamed at her to move. She lunged for the door, her fingers trembling as she yanked it open. In that moment, the world outside became clearer, a vast, open space under a starless sky, but it was crawling with drones, glowing eyes scanning for them beneath the dark canopy. "Go!" she shouted, the urgency in her voice precarious against the oncoming storm of metal. They burst through the door and into the night, unprepared for the chaos waiting just outside. But just as they reached the edge, a massive shadow loomed, swallowing them whole. Delilah's breath caught in her throat. They had just stepped into the eye of a true mechanical tempest, and she realized one horrifying truth: what awaited them wasn't mere survival but a fight against something far more sinister. "Why are they so organized?" Delilah gasped, sensing an intelligence behind the swarm. He glanced at her, eyes wide with dawning realization. "But that means their directive isn't just to hunt." Then, the darkness shook with a sudden, deafening roar, and she realized they had unwittingly walked into a war zone, one where they weren't merely targets but significant players in a twisted game. Could they change the tide of this battle, or were they just pawns in a horrific game of robotics? The quest for answers had only just begun. The wind howled, carrying the acrid scent of metal and oil as it bit against their skin. Delilah and her companion stood paralyzed by the looming army of drones, their sleek bodies glistening under the scattered light. Every heartbeat felt like thunder against the anxious silence, and with each beat, dread draped heavier across Delilah's chest. "What are we going to do?" she breathed, her voice barely audible above the growing din of mechanical whirs and beeps. "We need to split up," he urged, urgency etched deep across his features. "It'll confuse them. I'll draw them one way, and you go the other." "Are you insane?" she exclaimed, panic erupting inside her. "No one stands a chance against that many." He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but gentle, forcing her to meet his eyes. "It's the only way. Trust me. Head for those thick bushes, maybe they can't see you." She glanced toward the clump of shrubbery, little more than a mirage in the chaos. It felt like a trap, masked as a refuge. "And what if we never meet again?" The thought lodged a knife in her heart, a dread so sharp it nearly made her scream. "We will." He released her, an unexpected determination cartwheeling in his eyes. "Now go." Before she could process any of it, he turned and sprinted toward the horde of drones, his figure disappearing into the swirling darkness. Her stomach twisted, every instinct screamed at her to follow him, but she was frozen, rooted to the spot. The pulsating hum of the drones intensified, and she felt the shifting air as their sensors tracked her. Mustering every ounce of courage she had left, Delilah turned on her heel, bolting for the gnarly brush ahead. It was too long before the hum crescendoed into a frenzied buzz, thundering like a war drum. She could hear him, her companion's shouts echoing in the distance, thwarting the drone's focus momentarily. The bushes prickled against her skin as she ducked inside, pressing her body against the cold, unmoving ground. Breathing deeply, she willed her heart to slow, to quiet the frantic drumroll within her. She held her breath, straining to hear anything beyond the mechanical noise, and then she heard it. A low, persistent beep, growing louder and closer. The light from the swarm illuminated the ground as they approached. More than she had anticipated. She counted at least 10, forming a precise grid as they converged. Each beep felt like a countdown, and she could feel time slipping through her fingers, raw fear bubbling in her throat. With a shaking hand, Delilah grasped the sharp tool strapped to her belt, the cool metal comforting against her skin. Suddenly, the drone's searchlight swept the underbrush. Delilah held herself still, shaking, praying they would move on. But then, one of the drones wheeled closer, its sensors expanding and contracting like a predator sniffing its prey. A knot of terror tightened around her chest as she forced herself not to breathe, every muscle screaming to flee. Then, just 2 feet away, it hovered, pulsing with a strange, ominous light. The beeping had transformed, becoming a rhythmic pattern, urgent, fast. It felt like an alarm ringing in her ears, a sound that signaled victory or doom. And that s when she noticed the faint glimmer of a small screen on its side, displaying a blurry image. The image sharpened, and Delilah's stomach dropped as she recognized the face receiving the transmission, her companion, his expression urgent, urging, pleading for her to run. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted movement. The others behind her were shifting, being directed by something deeper. A chill crept up her spine. They were organized, but how? Who were these forces pulling the strings? Before she could dwell on that harrowing thought, a blare of sensors blasted near her, sending a ripple of shock through her frame. The drone turned toward her. In a heartbeat, instinct kicked in. She burst from the bushes, diving away from its light just as it fired hot energy humming through the air, burning the grass where she had been a split second ago. Run! She yelled, adrenaline now spurring her on, fast and furious. There was no time to think, only to do, but as she tore across the clearing, she could sense the change, like the ripple of a storm front. The horde was shifting, organizing itself in a way that felt strangely strategic, as if they were adapting. Delilah's breath sharpened, the weight of possibility pressing heavy upon her. This was no mindless swarm. Could it be? She whispered to herself, a thought terrifying enough to halt her decision. Just then, a sharp shout broke through the chaos. Delilah! Over here! It was him. But just as hope sparked within her, the ground trembled beneath her feet as a wall of drones shifted behind him, closing in. Go, go, go! He motioned frantically, but she froze once again, heart caught between two worlds, the safety of her leaving and the fate that awaited them together. Could they change the outcome of this battle? Or would they fall before a force that was fast becoming all too intelligent? Just then, a new sound rumbled in the distance, a low growl deep within the shadows, sending a pulse of dread back through her. What new horrors were passing through the darkness? The true nightmare was only beginning. Delilah's heart thundered as she sprinted toward her companion. The chaos around them tugged at the edges of her mind, desperate to overwhelm her with fear, yet she felt a fierce determination surging within. Together, they wouldn't just run, they would stand and fight. Keep moving! He shouted again, waving her on, but she could feel the weight of those pulse-pounding moments swarming her with uncertainty. The drones, relentless and methodical, were quickly adapting to their movements, shifting position like a dark wall enforcing their fate. Without thought, she dove behind a weathered pile of debris, the grit and grime tearing at her knees. The darkness felt alive, and even the air was heavy with dread. She leaned close, watching as the drones whirred and clicked ominously, their red lights pulsing like cold, watchful eyes. Delilah! He called, panic fueling his voice as he backed against a crumbling wall, fighting to keep the eager swarm at bay. We need a plan. A quick sweep around revealed marred metal and broken equipment. Shrapnel lay half buried in the dirt. Inspiration struck, and a plan took seed in her heart. Cover me! She shouted, scrambling toward a rusted generator. Delilah, no, he shouted, but she was already moving, preoccupied by a sudden rush of hope. The generator could, she believed, provide enough ignition to rattle the drones back for just a moment. As she wrestled with its stubborn stand, a compact attachment caught her eye, a spark plug, crusted with rust but still intact. With trembling hands, she seized it and turned back to him, shouting through the clamor, I can rig something. Just hold them off. Why do you always have to do this? He couldn't resist a small smile through the dread, a spark of camaraderie joining them against the tide of encroaching metal. With adrenaline tightening her focus, she went to work, her fingers fumbling at first but then moving with purpose. She fashioned a makeshift device, using the scant supplies to create a trigger mechanism. The generator growled to life, and Delilah could hear it struggling against the strain. But as the drone lights shifted and closed in, the pressure of time felt like a noose tightening around her throat. Delilah! He called again, urgency replacing enjoyment. They're too close. I'm almost there. She fought to maintain her composure, sweat slipping down the back of her neck as terror pierced her like an icicle. Just give me a moment. With every ounce of concentration, she snapped the device into place, a spark igniting brightly enough to light up her tense face. A primal roar erupted from the generator as it released a lurching surge of energy. Now! She shouted, sending the device flying right toward the nearest cluster of drones. Time seemed to slow. For one heart-stopping moment, the world hung in suspense. Just as the device detonated with a blinding flash, a deafening crack echoed through the night, ripping apart the air with a shockwave. Drones exploded into fragments, illuminating the darkness like fireworks gone mad. The chaos sent metal shards spiraling in every direction, and for an instant, they had carved out a small path between the destruction. Let us run. Delilah screamed, panic flickering at the edges of her mind. She grabbed his arm, pulling him forward as they raced down the newly opened path. Together, they bolted past the wreckage, moving as fast as their bodies would allow, their hearts beating in a shared rhythm of hope and despair. But as they neared the distant safety of a forest line, a low growl echoed through the air again, new and menacing. Something's following us. Delilah shouted, pulling him faster into the murky coats of trees that awaited them. Suddenly, from the shadows, a massive drone, larger and more intimidating than the others, emerged, its form articulated with disconcerting grace. The night felt colder, darker, as it loomed overhead. "Oh my God," he gasped, horror twisting his features. With nowhere left to run, they turned to face this overwhelming force, standing side by side as desperation clawed at their throats. "We can't let fear take us now," she said, breathing heavily, locking eyes with him through the chaos. "We won't give in." As the drone swooped down toward them, Delilah raised the crowbar one last time. "Let us make this count." With one last rush of adrenaline, they surged forth, prepared to confront their greatest fear head-on, knowing that together they had something far more powerful than fear. Their connection ignited a wellspring of courage, of defiance. They wouldn't let this be their end. The sound of chaos erupted behind them as they charged forward, hearts alight with fury against despair. This was it. The fight transcended mere survival. It would mark a stand against the encroaching darkness, a testament that humanity would not be easily subdued. And as the dark drone descended like a shroud of their doom, time stood still in that moment of bittersweet defiance. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss any of the exclusive stories coming up. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the community alive. Flood that comments section with your reactions and theories, and let us discuss this thrilling conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this all turned out. Your support matters so much. It's what keeps us going strong.